so good to be here amongst y'all. I was up in British Columbia last week looking at brown and grizzly bears coming out of the hole and black bears. And I come back and was in the field all week, and I started my week on Monday looking at 640 acres in Coosa County. And the Ips beetle had about 30% of them already dead, about another 30% red topping, about another 30% going to be dead by July and August, so that's 640 acres. I don't believe there'll be a living tree left on it.
What area was that?
It's south, Coosa near Nicksburg. They thinned it last year during the drought. They had thinning stress, then they got drought stress, and they had a mild winter. It's one of the biggest Ips beetle attacks I've seen. I mean, they wanted $2,250 an acre in the recreation market. They're lucky going to get 400. They can't even salvage it. It's just a loss. But that map that Lee put out the other day on Ips, you got to watch that map. And anything that's been thinned in the last couple of years is going to be a potential. Lee asked me just to come up with some ideas that my clients have on how to use a herbicide to enhance their property. So I started asking them, what are you guys interested in the most? And I have clients who are always questioning me about intensive silviculture or even age forest management. I do a lot of work where I establish and maintain in perpetuity old field habitats without advancing forest succession, keeping it in an early successional stage. A lot of my landowners want the native herbaceous plants and wild flowers, and we can increase native plant biodiversity up to 400 to 500 species if you know how to use selective herbicides. Some want pollinators, some want avian biodiversity, and those three things are connected. If you do one, you get the other two. What are some wildlife habitat enhancement ideas, and what are interspersion indexes and ecotones? So that's the stuff I'm going to talk about today. It's not going to be intensive forest management. It's just going to be kind of some things that are secondary. So I want to start out with even age forest management. Every time we go to the grocery store, we're walking in and parking in a clear cut. You know, we use clear cuts all the time. Our houses are little mini clear cuts. Where we go to church is a little clear cut. We use clear cuts to benefit society. So that's a clear cut. As a wildlife biologist, it's the best habitat out there, is early successional plant communities. So I'm an advocate of clear cutting for wildlife habitat and game and non-game species biodiversity. I would have rather clear cut Yellowstone than watched 400,000 acres go up in smoke. Wouldn't it have been better to have managed it? How many 400,000 acre catastrophic wildfire events happen on private land? Zero, because we manage our land and we use clear cuts as a management tool. Well, that's 300 or 400 species of herbaceous plants that come back after herbicide treatment. Most of my herbicide treatments now, I do about 3,000 acres a year. I've regenerated about 1,250,000 acres. Most of them are imazapyr glyphosate based. And I just use two rates now, 24 and 2 and 16 and 3. So if I have pine wildlings, I bump my glyphosate up a quart. If I have hardwoods, I use 24 ounces of imazapyr. And I do 3,000 acres a year using two rates and 15 GPA with 1% surfactant. So benefits of clear cuts to society: they mimic nature in a controlled manner, prevents natural disasters, control diseases and insects, allows establishment of a young, vigorous forest, mandatory for many shade intolerant trees, reduces CO2, produces oxygen, increases light availability, early successional plants, preferred food plants for wildlife, maximizes biodiversity and species richness of both vegetation and animals. Requirement for many wildlife species, it's important for ESA management, maximizes productive capacity and revenue, and we use them all the time. Has anybody ever heard, anybody on the nightly news ever mention any of those? Katie Couric ever mention any of those? Baba Walla, she ever mention any of those? No, they hide that. They hide that from the American people, don't they? It doesn't fit their agenda. So they hide it. They'd rather see Yellowstone burn up than to promote active forest management. So the benefits of even age management are unknown to the American people because they've never been educated as to their benefits. They've been miseducated. So that's one of the, don't get me on the subject of the hoax formerly known as man-made global warming, but I have a talk called Global Warming, Global Hoax. It's unbelievable. I don't believe that soccer moms driving minivans control the temperature of the earth. But that's another subject. All right. Imazapyr, you know, is legume tolerant, so it's great if you want to regenerate legumes. It's also rubus tolerant. So you can use selective chemistry to enhance certain suites of species. And then you have the recolonization of additional species from the seed pool. So a lot of what I do is just trying to encourage plants to germinate by removing the plants that are kind of in the way. I still do a lot of longleaf regeneration, which, because of the much longer period between canopy closure, you get incredible suites of very desirable plants and flowering plants with longleaf. So a lot of my clients that are more into the wildlife and non-game species are moving towards longleaf. I have clients that just want wildflowers. This client from North Carolina wanted butterflies. She said, I love butterflies. I want to get a lot of butterflies on my property. What can I do? Well, we'll bring a helicopter in. We'll get rid of all that low-quality hardwood brush. We'll run a fire through it in the dormant season, and you'll have wildflowers. And she said, really? So I took her over there the next spring and said, yeah, really? That's all you got to do. It's not difficult. And in some instances, you'll actually have rare and endangered plant species germinate that weren't there prior to the treatment, because the seed pool had the seed, but there were no plants. That's another clear cut. That's Coosa County. That's over by Weogufka. That was 400 acres looked like that. Yeah, 400 acres looked like that. It's beautiful. It's so dense. We didn't do anything. That seed's already in the seed pool. All you got to do is take the low quality hardwood brush off of it. And sometimes you'll run a fire through it depending on what species you want, and sometimes we don't. That's another wildflower patch after a aerial herbicide application. That's another one. So I wish I knew how many wildflowers have germinated on that 1.5 million acres. It's probably in the billions. It's on virtually every clear cut, every tract that I treat every year. It's like this. It's not just an occasional occurrence. If you don't have wildflowers because of depleted seed pools, like when I drove up here today, there's a big cotton field about a mile from here, had repeated herbicide treatment annually for many, many years. The native plant seed pool has been depleted. You have to introduce plants occasionally. So for pollinators, I like to introduce sunflower, because you'll have millions of bees. You have 10, 15 different species of bees. So I'll introduce sometimes flowering plants. And if you look at the pine-dominated silviculture in Alabama over the years, and it really isn't increasing, it's pretty much second, third generation stuff now. That's what our turkey population done. That's what our deer population's done. We've probably got 3.5 million deer in the state now. So it's very difficult to say that clear cutting and intensive silviculture harms wildlife. It doesn't. It helps wildlife. Everywhere that we practice clear cutting, we have more species of wildlife and more density of wildlife. So I like small, irregularly shaped patchwork clear cuts, separated with SMZs, adjacent to mixed stands and hardwood stands, so that we have the maximum biodiversity of species richness. The fewest species in America are in old growth forests. And why are we managing 119 million acres for old growth when there's the fewest species there? And I'll show you more about that in a moment. All right, this is a 45-year-old saw log rotation, been burned every 3 years. And all burning does to low-quality hardwood, it just makes them mad, doesn't it? It shuts them down, it slows them down for a year or two, and then they bounce back. So this is all sweet gum-dominated understory with no herbaceous plants. And that's what burning gives you over time. So you can bring in a helicopter from the air or do it through the ground, but I'll do a herbicide treatment in September or October, run a fire through it in January or February. The next year it looks like this. That's the exact same camera angle. So I call this QVM. This was straight imazapyr at 16 ounces, followed by burn, and that stimulates legumes. Most of this is partridge pea, desmodium, and Lespedeza with some rubus. The seed man told me that on a per acre basis, it's about $400 per acre worth of seed there. It cost us nothing. It's already there. Just take the sweet gum off of it, run a fire through it to scarify the serotinous seed, and the next spring you'll have it all germinate, and that's what it looked like 3 years later. And it'll look like that 10 years from now. This is right behind the Westervelt Lodge up in Aliceville.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of ecosystems that I like to create using herbicides. Take off the low quality stuff that you don't want that has no wildlife value, and then encourage these preferred wildlife food plants to germinate without introducing secondary seed. And if you do have a place that has a depleted seed pool and you want a specific plant, like this is I did a herbicide burn down here with glyphosate, and then I just wind distributed partridge pea. I just threw it up in the air. I ran my four-wheeler up and down it, and I just threw the seed up in the air. That's all you have to do. It's so light you can't see it. You can't see it. I mean, you can drill it, but you can't see it. So that was a wind-distributed partridge pea patch for a landowner who wanted partridge pea, so you can plant it. I do a lot of native plant fertilization, mostly for white-tailed deer to increase the protein content, get it up from 6 or 7 or 8% up to 28, 30% if I'm growing horns. And if you look at early successional ecosystems, what we're trying to do in a lot of instances is keep this early successional plant community in perpetuity without advancing into the later stages of forestry succession. And you can do that, believe me, with a herbicide treatment, but it takes 2 different treatments. You got to come in and take care of the problem in your open fields first. Pull out the ash, the maple, the sweet gum, all your low-quality hardwoods. I call this a flex boom. These are 045 boom busters. They spray 18 feet on the side with a 4-foot overlap, so every swath is 40 feet. So take those hardwoods out, and then you can determine whether or not you want to run a fire through it, depending on what type of herbaceous plants you want to germinate. So that's a function of the goal of the landowner. And then 3 years later, this is what it looks like. And it'll look like this for the next 30 years. You'll never have encroachment of low-quality hardwoods into those open fields. So you're kind of manipulating Mother Nature. Now, how do you keep the light, wind-distributed seeds out of this field? You got to go in and you got to inject them, right? So all your sweet gum, all your ash, all your maple, all your light-seeded seeds with some winged samaras, you got to inject them in the winter. That's what all these skeletons are. So you leave your hardwoods in there like your oaks and your hickory that's dropping acorns, but you take out all your light-seeded species so they don't wind distribute into this field again, and you can keep early successional fields, for decades. I did 3,000 acres on this client just for quail, and he was using a double-winged bat wing, running it 12 months out of the year, and all he was doing was making the hardwoods mad. It got to the point where they couldn't even walk through their fields because of the sweet gum. You get about 9 or 10 sprouts for every low-quality hardwood that you mechanically sever. So you're increasing stem density about 10-fold with every treatment. So usually when I have landowners that like a bush hog, the first thing I do with their bush hog is I chain it to a post with a big lock. Because they're just out there, just tearing their habitat up.
What's the boundary requirements for injection and killing your boundary trees?
Well, you don't really, you just want the ones on the edge primarily, especially if they're separated like this. Now, if I had 4 or 5 of them real close together, I'd probably go in 30 or 40 yards. But if they're selected like that, there's spatial distribution between them, and you're not going to get wind, coming through the canopies. So that's a good question. But over inject them. If you need to go 2 or 3 deep, take them out. Just go ahead and take them out. It costs about 3 cents a tree to inject them. Just use a standard axe, 1 injection site for every 4 inches of DBH. Insert 1 milliliter into the cut of 50% diluted imazapyr, and you take no prisoners. So, and I mentioned imazapyr is legume tolerant. It's not if you inject it. But if you have honey locusts or black locusts, it'll take them out too.
You put in a liter?
You say 1 liter?
No, milliliters. We're talking about one drop, and of that one drop, 50% is imazapyr. So it literally takes 2 drops to kill an 8-inch tree at about 3 cents or 2 cents.
You have to be licensed to use that?
No. No. It's got the same toxicity as hairspray and antiperspirant and toothpaste. So you can use it. Pardon? It's Arsenal. Arsenal is the trade name. All right, this is the interspersion index feature. I call them spoken hubs. They look like a big turkey foot. That's a oak stand. This is a no burn silviculture with an imazapyr site prep. And notice with no burn, you get a lot of pockets. And I like that, especially for quail. I heard 19 quail calling in this pine stand the morning that we took this picture. So I like to cut a trail into the existing adjacent habitat. Usually plant that on an 8x10, 545. I like to bush hog the inside of the left edge. I like to disc the inside of the right edge. And these areas here are called ectones, which are edge effects. Plant the middle. And I like them to be real wavy and curvy, 400, 500 yards long. So those are good deer hunting situations. And for avian biodiversity, I mentioned forest succession. You have species that like early successional stages, openings like the old field openings, mid-successional and late successional. So you want to manage your forest land with all age classes adjacent to each other, side by side. These are early successional avian species. These are mid-successional avian species. And these are late successional species. So each species are adapted to a certain suite of plants at a certain level of forest succession. And if you look at the number of abundance, the number of species, and the number of biodiversity, the highest and most intense level of forest management have the highest number of species in all cases. No management is a poor option. And that's neotropical migrants and interior species, same thing. So if you want birds, manage your forest. All right, I'm going to crank because we were started just a little bit late. I'll probably be a couple of minutes late. These are ectones. These are the edge effects that I talked about, rotational strip disking. And I put an ecotone around every opening. Sometimes I'll use 2,4-D and promote grasses for nesting habitat. This is rotational strip disking. All right, so we're at a crossroads in forest management. We manage our private forests extremely well, and our state lands are still managed well, but our federal lands are dying, and they're in extremely unhealthy situation. So we have this crossroads with a mature forest. We want to harvest it and help our society, side prep it, reforest it, birth of a new forest, and then you have cash flows, or do you just want to let it die and decline? Well, who would do that? I mean, the federal government's the only people that can let hundreds of thousands and millions of acres die every year. Private landowners can't do it. All right, so the nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets which it must turn over to the next generation, increased and not impaired in value. The problem then is how to bring about a stirring for harmony with land, among a people many of whom have forgotten there is any such thing as land, among whom education and culture have become almost synonymous with landlessness. That's the problem of conservation education. Aldo Leopold saw that 40 years ago, and it's coming to fruition now. Snowflakes. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.